Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Pastor Eric, and I have a couple cool episodes for you to listen to. This is our Best of Summer series. The next few episodes will be replays of some of our most listened to episodes of Faith Over Breakfast, so I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton. I'm sitting here with Eric Siepen from the Village Church in Tucson. My church is Mission Church. And we sit down and we have changed days. We now meet on Fridays. We sit down on Fridays and we have the post-breakfast conversation.
Yeah, post-breakfast.
We miss the days when we ate together, but you all don't because you heard us chew and that was weird. But Eric has coffee and tea. And I drank some right before I came, and we are in the breakfast table conversation where we unpack something.
Yeah.
It has to do with faith, culture, things we're thinking through due to being in local churches. And the podcast is basically this. You're invited to sit at the table with us. And if you were here, we would acknowledge you. But we just can't see you, but you can see us, and you can hear us. And we don't script this. This isn't an interview. This is a breakfast table conversation, and you're invited. So we love it. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, we invited a few of you to the table at the end. So if you listen all the way, you can hear a little bit about us.
Your invitation. So today we start with Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
Ready? Let's go. Well, Eric. I mean, Miley Cyrus is still on your phone. I can see it right now. You're thinking about Miley. What's going on with Miley? What's going on in Miley's life?
I don't know. She just released this single. I think it's called Used to Be Young.
Used to Be Young. Yeah, I listened to it.
And I listened to it a couple days ago, and I had this thought. And the thought was, if I were planting a church back in the day, because this is how I went about it, I took a collection of songs, and I would go to churches that could support the ministry I was doing, and I would dissect some of these songs for them to show them like the ethos of the young people.
Yeah.
And I have always thought, no matter what she was doing, that Miley was a prophet at some level for her culture.
Sure.
She, and not in a prophetic way, more just saying, this is what we're thinking. This is what's going on inside.
She's like a narrator for the culture.
Yeah. And maybe like what I mean by prophetic is talking about the road that they're on and they're going down. So now she's in her 30s, maybe 30, 31. I don't know how old she is.
I was curious about how old she was, seeing as the song was about
early 30s. I know between 30 to 32.
She's exactly 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
So if I'm 40, she's about 30.
Okay, so she's 30 then. And she's singing this song about used to be young and sort of the wild life that she lived and sort of the freedom and maybe sort of some of the damage that caused. And then there's this sort of conflict over, does she regret it? Does she not regret it?
Right.
She's changed. This is not, it's obvious that she's saying it's not healthy to continue this lifestyle.
Says it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the video, I think, makes even more statements because she comes on and she has her Disney Mickey Mouse shirt on. And then over it, she has a very provocative red sequin shirt. And it's sort of, it represents the two hers that we have experienced over the last 30 years in the public eye.
Yeah, I actually was curious as I listened to this if how much of this she foresaw all along. Like, there's been one of the things she seems to be known for is her reinventions of herself. And I don't know how much of those they dawn upon her and she goes, oh, okay, or how much marketing team conversations there are or whatever. But, there was Hannah Montana and then And then it was Miley Cyrus, who's the rebel, and and then
highly inappropriate things.
Right, the shockingly inappropriate things. And this seems like she's kind of, looking at it as a 30-year-old artist. She goes, so, okay, who are my fans? What are they going through in life? What would they listen to me say? Like she's saying to them what they're thinking about themselves.
Right, which is why I kind of think she's slightly prophetic.
Yeah, totally.
I know she wrote the song 2 years ago.
Okay.
I know she went through a relatively off and on relationship and then divorced with Liam.
Liam Hemsworth.
Hemsworth, yes.
Mm-hmm. I know that
not
via Wikipedia.
Not Thor, but the one
ago.
from the Hunger Games.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. You want to know how? I am sometimes connected to our culture. I've never watched Hunger Games.
Yeah,
I think there's. I've never listened to a Mark Driscoll sermon, nor have I ever watched Hunger Games. Those two facts tell you something about Andy Littleton.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, Andy.
I know.
So anyway, what did you think about this? Because in some ways, neither of us are really that connected to her. Like she reminds me of more like a Drew Barrymore mixed with Madonna. Like those two people met in their young lifestyles that they lived.
Well, I felt that the artist who had a little more influence on me was actually her dad.
Okay.
In my like the culture I grew up in.
Yeah.
So Billy Ray Cyrus was. I had probably had his tapes and listened to when his songs came on as a kid.
Here, guys, his tapes.
Yep, that's right, and that's true. And by the time CDs were out, I had moved on from that phase.
Yeah.
But when his songs would come on the radio, I was like, there we go. Like that's more, my dad was excited about George Strait and Clint Black and the
Sure.
kind of the classics,
Sure.
Alan Jackson actually, especially. And I would be like tolerating that. And then Billy Ray Cyrus would come on. I was like, oh, what is this? Is crazy stuff. So anyway, I was tuned in with her father. So when she came along, being 10 years younger,
right.
and Hannah Montana, I didn't care.
Yeah, you didn't care.
But anyway, what were you saying about us?
No, I just think that she's not of our culture. Like Madonna and Drew Barrymore kind of lived this very similar lives in their youth and did some provocative public things.
Britney Spears was the one of my age group. Like,
yeah. And so I'm not connected to her, but so it just got me thinking because I'm like, okay, well, what's coming out of this that the people who are now in their 30s and late 20s are wrestling with? And what is she talking about? What is she is she touching on anything? I mean, it's an age-old story, but she's touching on maybe something a little differently because it's her generation.
Sure.
What's she touching on? What might church? How does the church kind of come alongside this story?
Well, it made me curious as I listened to it today, and there are current events in the life of our church, I think, that tie into this. But yeah, what are those 10 years younger than me processing, going through, trying to figure out? I've been thinking about that anyway. And so yeah, it made me wonder, here's a cultural icon of that era, how that speaks to what these folks are going through. I think the Village and Mission both have a lot of her generation.
We do.
Yeah.
Well, I felt like she really touched on that, seeking some like fullness and sort of in the party lifestyle and in the like just trying to find intimacy and sort of.
It was like no rules. I mean,
no rule. Yeah.
I'm trying to. Let's think about this line of thought for a second. So, you referenced Madonna. You're about 10 years older than me.
Yep.
I referenced Britney Spears, who's the.
Right.
There were others, but that's the one that stands out. Like she was the kind of sex icon of the time, and then who she was with and how her life fell apart. And even recently, friends of mine, the Free Britney thing and her conservatorship, they still care about what's going on with her.
There's people in our church who
who
were really interested in
it mattered
seeing her
freed from her conservatorship. And and just how is she doing? Because it seems to reflect on us. And then here's Miley the 10 years later. But there are differences there are similarities and there are differences. And I think maybe to get into what Miley Cyrus is processing and what that means, maybe it'd be helpful for you and me to think about what were the core rebellions,
sure,
and then coming of age moments for Madonna, Britney Spears, and Miley Cyrus. So let's start with Madonna.
Well, and
because I'm curious about the difference. There's similarities, but there's some differences.
Well, I think for instance, Madonna came to fame in a moment when there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't, so there's more mono pop culture.
Yeah.
And so she utilizes. I mean, she becomes a icon.
Yeah.
In a different way. There aren't multiple icons.
Yeah. Like
her. There's just one.
Yeah.
And it's Madonna. And I think she came also into a time when it was like, what was the reason to fit in? What was the reason to do what you're supposed to do? What was the reason to not have fun?
Yeah.
What was, wasn't. She was pushing boundaries and it was the 80s. It was everything go and everything big.
Well, yeah, the 80s. I mean, and I'm thinking of a song that stands out to me as Material Girl.
Yeah.
A cause that she fought for. It seems like, and you would probably remember more of this, but I remember her Kids in Africa. Was it disease? Was it water? I mean, she seemed to so she had there were some freedoms that she was fighting for. And with Material Girl, it was this embracing of even the consumerism of human beings. I'm not necessarily glamorizing it, but just saying it is what it is. I don't know. How would you interpret some of that?
Yeah, and that's hard for me only because Madonna, came along when I was younger, and certainly in a conservative Christian home, she was seen as
off limits,
the devil's enemy, and I had our devil's companion and our enemy. So I didn't have any, I didn't listen to her music. Also, when I was listening to being rebellious and listening to music I shouldn't be listening to, I was listening to punk music and underground music, which saw her as contentious.
She was pop and stupid.
And the lines were, and maybe they are just as drawn now. But I don't experience them that way. I feel like artists can move into different genres, and that's acceptable, where it was not acceptable.
Well, I think even talking about that is a big difference. Yeah. So back in the 80s, in Christian culture, so you think about why, there's a lot. So the 50s, there seemed to be kind of this move toward monolithic American identity or something, I don't know. And then everything breaks open in the 60s, and there's a push for freedom, a push for justice, the Vietnam War and the response to that. And then in the 70s, it's almost like, I don't know, the 60s you were smoking weed, the 70s it got a little darker. You can even just see it in I tend to think of architecture and color, the 70s got darker.
Yes. And I think what happened was too, even in the Jesus movement, you have these big revivals, people come to Christ who are in those lifestyles. The free sex, free drug lifestyle, they clean up.
Yeah.
They don't want their children to go through this.
So they become very conservative.
And insular.
Yeah. And so Jesus Revolution, that movie, is not going to paint that whole story for you. I haven't seen it yet, it's a good movie. I plan to see it. I'm meaning to. But I'm just saying it's talking about that era, and there are those who are older than us. And I just had a conversation with a couple. That was when they came to Christ,
right?
And I think they came into the movement where you were cleaning everything up, and then they sort of started to second guess that because it got really controlling and legalistic and interesting. So there's this swing for them. And of course, they're parenting the ones, us, and then the ones who are growing up now.
Right.
But yeah, in the 80s, and I do remember this very clearly with Madonna and other artists. I was small, but I heard about it from those ahead of me.
Right.
It was, you couldn't, like, your parents were like, no. And they're remembering the 60s.
Right.
And they're like, we're not going to touch that. We're not going to go anywhere near that. That is off limits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
so it's hard for me to speak to Madonna, but she is part. And one stream is very clear when you look back. Sexual revolution. She's bringing a new sexual revolution.
Yeah.
Into the public square.
Yeah.
Like, so pushing the decency rules of the visual decency rules and out there, and getting herself in trouble and doing very sexually explicit kinds of things as far as she can push those things. That's part of her persona, the wild life.
Yeah.
But she becomes the icon for it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Marilyn Monroe once did this too.
Yes.
If you just think there tends to be
right,
and it's often there are men, but there's often a woman.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I feel like I heard whispers of Madonna having engaged with some faith stuff later in her life. Do you know anything about that?
No. Well, she was part of the Kabbalah, and she's Jewish mysticism and still is, I think, part of who she is.
Yeah. So then I'm trying to think with Britney Spears. Britney Spears was not off limits to myself and my friends who were churchgoers. Right. So there's a difference.
Baby.
And one thing about it was technology had changed. I don't think our parents had caught up on that.
Napster is a part of things at this point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, so the first time I saw Baby Baby by Britney Spears was at my friend Sam's house on the TV in the living room.
Right.
With his parents probably very nearby. And I remember something to the effect of Sam saying, "Dude, come here." And I went over, we were both just like, oh, wow.
Right.
As young boys, just like,
sure.
Who's that? Maybe I could meet her,
Yep.
And she could come dance at our school. But my family didn't have MTV because economically we couldn't have MTV.
And my family didn't have a TV. So.
And my family didn't have a TV when I was younger, again, mostly for economic reasons.
Right.
So back then, if you were poor, you might not have a TV.
Right.
Now, everybody's got a TV. Actually, if you're poor, you might have more TVs. Actually, right now, the wealthier people I know don't have a TV. The poorer people have multiple giant big screens. Yeah. But at that time, that was reserved for the higher up the ladder you were, the more access you had to a TV. So we got one eventually, but we got a very low tech one with these metal buttons that you'd push and mildly get zapped when you changed the channel, and it had a remote with two buttons, an up and a down.
Nice.
And we could not get MTV. We had rabbit ears, which is a form of antenna, and we got a few channels. And so I watched The Wonder Years was my and then with a little bit of time, The Simpsons shaped me, and Frasier and Seinfeld.
Okay.
And would I have gone and chosen those shows? Maybe not. I just didn't have a whole lot of options. That was one of the few.
That was the culture you swam in.
That was the culture I swam in. So, but my friend, who was a little above the ladder, had MTV, saw Britney Spears. But I think our families weren't thinking yet about the impact of that technology.
Yeah.
And so it was, if you had access, you just could go for it. And so that whole she's the devil's advocate thing wasn't really there. I think a worry we started to have, and my youth pastor, Missy, on our episode talked about how she started to try to find alternatives for us.
Yes.
But she wouldn't tell us, you can't listen to this. She would assume we did, and then would go, I'm going to find a Christian parallel replacement for you and try to help you with that. Missy's so sweet. The way she talked about it felt very effective. When I was a kid, I didn't tend to like what she gave me. I did feel a sense of serious guilt at some point that I was listening to some stuff.
Right.
I remember chucking my CDs out the window of my car in one of those moments of guilt, and then I replaced most of them soon after. It wasn't off limits, but it was, let's try to create a Christian alternative. And there were Christian alternatives to Britney Spears, one of whom was Katy Perry. before she was Katy Perry. She came up in the Christian market.
That's true.
As an alternative to Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and so on and so forth. So, and interestingly, that alternative actually morphed into being even more controversial than Britney Spears.
Right.
Yeah.
Perry did do that.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's my generation, and it felt like so the whole thing with Britney Spears, her big line in that song, "I'm not that innocent," it was like this kid who is like has this level of like an innocent background. She grew up Christian, I believe, as did people like Bieber and others later, but who kind of broke out and just joined in with the culture. And that's exactly what you could say happened with Katy Perry. Broke out, joined in with the culture, but there wasn't this hard dividing line.
Right. Now
let's attempt to think through this with Miley Cyrus. What did the people 10 years younger than us, I mean, Hannah Montana, she was just there. She was on Disney Channel.
Right. Pretty innocent.
Yeah.
And then she changes her image.
Party in the USA.
Yeah.
I still hear this song at like every wedding.
Yes.
And every 4th of July.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then she really changed it. Like it came in like a wrecking ball kind of just, it was. And the things she was doing at the different awards, ceremonies and things like that.
And it was more intense. It felt like with Madonna, it always felt purposefully rebellious but under control.
Yeah,
to me. Then Britney Spears felt like she fell apart.
Yeah,
it was like you watched her and you were just like, oh, poor Britney.
Yeah. With
Miley, it was like she's doing this to shock us.
Right, and I feel like with Miley and Miley is a better artist than most of the artists coming up. And when you look at her just from a technical perspective, like her voice is, she has a Miley Cyrus voice, but then Miley Cyrus can sing almost any song and you're like, oh, is that Miley Cyrus?
Yeah.
No, I mean, it is, because she is a well-trained vocalist and musician. So she comes at things from a lot of different angles. Like she's thinking these things out and how she's going to do this.
It's purposeful, and sometimes. So again, with Britney, you felt like she got out there and lost herself.
Yeah.
With Miley, it's like this is calculated. This is, and I'm not saying that like, oh, it's devious. But it felt even more Madonna-esque in a way.
Yeah.
But more extreme.
I think the difference. Here's the thing: is I think that she grew up in an age of psychology in a way that others haven't, and being sensitive to who you are.
Okay.
Right. So
more aware.
Yeah. So she's just come out. She's not touring because she can't handle it mentally. She said. I think this song is saying my community of people, the people who are my fans, are overwhelmed. And they are lonely, and the life that they lived is not who they are anymore, and they can't get that. Like, whatever momentary highs they were getting only have these deep lows, and now we have to grow up.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to do that. Not yet sure what growing up looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's, you could see that in the video with the other two outfits still on. Like,
right.
Here I'm not young. What am I?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. And I think that is the question that I think basically people who are 28 to 35 are asking themselves right now in this culture is, who am I? Why am I doing this? Most people, even from my generation, most people at 35 have 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds, right? They have established families and established jobs. And a lot of people in this age group are looking around being like, I'm not married. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
Like, I've got nothing. I did all this crazy and I have nothing.
Yeah. Or now there's segments. There's segments that say I did a lot of crazy and I've got nothing. There's a segment I think that goes, I haven't done anything crazy
and I got nothing.
And the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
Now what do I do? How do I start? I mean, really?
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. Yes,
I mean,
that's true.
I mean, I kind of hate this, but this gets thrown around with men a lot, is the phrase failure to launch.
Right. Right.
But it's like, I'm 30, I'm passing 30. trying to not live at home,
Right.
Like I think there's the version of I did crazy. There's a version of I don't know if I've done anything. And there's probably a couple other versions. So I'm thinking of this demographic in our community, and I can think of, there's a spectrum. Some of our 30-some-year-olds, I'm like, wow, they've pretty balanced.
Yep.
Actually.
Yeah.
And then some where it's like they've made some big moves, but it's still very complicated. That feels a little more like Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
Like, I've done some serious things, but I'm still very confused. And then a group that's like stuck.
Yeah.
And do you have any sense of what the differences are or why?
Between those three? Well, I think they're all kind of the same. I mean, they've got the same thing going, though. They're still all, even the one that has something is questioning what the point is.
Well, I mean, one of the ones that crossed my mind, and this doesn't, I don't know that it like answers those layers, but there are a lot more children of divorced parents.
Yes.
In there. And there will be another bigger wave coming. A couple of them coming. And that's not the only, but that factors in a way that didn't in the Madonna era. Actually, even when my buddy Sam and I were watching Britney Spears, I'm trying to think how many of our parents were divorced. Of my good friends, one of my good friends' parents got divorced later from that era, but it was more rare. It was pretty surprising.
Yeah.
Now it's not.
Well, I think, one of the reasons that you and I can probably sit down and have a lot of connectedness, we're close in generations, so we have similar TV shows.
Yeah.
We have similar music.
We've touched on this a little.
Yeah. I think there's such a huge disconnection from one another in what you so you and I could sit down if we had just met in the mid-90s and we could spend an hour and a half, 2 hours having shallow conversation and feel connected because we had so many areas to have shallow conversation about.
Well, when I talk to people my age, so I'm wearing a Chicago Cubs hat right now, right?
Yeah.
If I could almost guarantee to you today, walking around, someone somewhere in my age group will go, yeah, Cubbies. Yeah. How'd you become a Cubs fan? I'm serious. Happens all the time. And I'll say, my friend had WGN on his TV, and they'll go, yep, me too, or something.
Yep.
Because we all, literally the only baseball team that gave its rights away for free
right
in the 80s and 90s was the Chicago Cubs.
Smart
and they
move,
were it was a genius move. That's why there's so many Cubs fans. You couldn't watch baseball. If you had, my favorite team is the Oakland A's. If they didn't make it to the World Series, I couldn't watch them on TV.
Right.
The only way I could watch them on TV is if they played the Cubs.
Right.
And they never did.
Right.
And then what we referenced earlier, Simpsons, Seinfeld, there was a short list of television stations that were available. Cable was starting to come in,
but
later in my, even when I was in grade school, I didn't really know anybody had cable. Or maybe just a couple. I didn't even know what it was. So those cultural things were shared. Music, there's the country station, there's the hits station, which is like the stuff from the previous generation.
Right.
There's the pop station, KRQ around here, right?
Right.
So you pick one of those lanes, but then you hear all the same songs together. Right. So we all liked Hit Me Baby One More Time because
Yep.
I mean, we didn't. Even if you didn't like it, you knew
just
it.
listened to it.
You just were aware.
Station.
It was just there. And then you had your, and then actually the hip hop stations were starting to come in for me around that time. But there were just a few lanes.
Yeah, not many lanes.
And then, so I've thought about that now with my daughter. My daughter loves, she loves, Amarillo by Morning by George Strait because I like it and somehow she connected to it. Her friends, she probably doesn't have one friend that likes that song.
Right.
She loves it. All of the kids coming up now, and actually even Miley Cyrus's generation, have had not only is there more of this idea of individual identity, you can go pick. I walked into the store at home the other day. I have resisted this store for a long time. Yes. I needed something there. There's so many home goods. I walk in, I was just like, is this like a mile of baskets?
It's a mile of baskets.
It's a mile of baskets. that's how it feels when you go out and pick the things that you like and connect over. Right. There's so much of it. And then therefore you don't have that easy connection, that just little cultural small talk connection.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think like one of the other things is, and now I'm starting to think about this, is even though my mom never listened to Madonna, my mom never listened to these people, she knew who they were.
And it was talked about.
Those music, and it was talked about. So I'm talking to somebody in our church, and I tell her, like, I don't think there's any more monolithic musicians except for, and then I tell her the tall blonde chick, because I can't remember her name.
Taylor Swift,
right? Who, you know, is single-handedly saving the music industry. But then she started naming people that are really big that I've never heard of them. Like Bunny, somebody.
Bad Bunny.
I don't know these people.
Doesn't even, most of the songs you won't, it's mostly Spanish.
Right.
But I have several on my playlist.
Right.
Yeah.
And she started naming some other things. Then I started talking to junior high teacher, and guess who? Kanye West is still a big deal in junior high. Sure. Like, so there are still some lithic cultural artists, but I don't think they are as big, even though in the same way in making like cultural statements and in having a connection for all of us, even if we don't know who they are.
And for them to be big, they have to do very different things.
Yes.
So Bad Bunny's thing is, I mean, it's just, I part of why I think it works is because it's in Spanish, and you can be a little more comfortable with the lyrics because they don't land on you.
Right.
How sexual
English,
they are.
If you're an English,
which is part of, honestly, what happens with me. I don't, because I'm not piecing it all together. I can just kind of nod my head along. If I were hearing it, I might be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then that's one example. Then you've got,
but anyway.
Well, yeah, Beyonce and Taylor Swift, and they have to do more. Like, there's a lot coming out about Beyonce and her religious thinking, and how much she's weaving in like some strong kind of like deity stuff. But even so, you almost have to do something like that to carve your lane. And,
right.
And yeah, Taylor with the being independent, and that whole deal. I think Justin Bieber, like, I think the Christian faith thing with him, and Kanye too, like this public struggle with like faith and trying to, and falling apart, and that all being a very public narrative. If you don't do that, you lose all attention. And I wonder sometimes how much of it's real and how much of it's a marketing scheme. And that's another new thing that's happening. None of us trust the narrative anymore.
Right.
My wife sent me a news article about how Sudafed isn't effective. My immediate thought was, is this legitimate? Anytime I see news or anything about any celebrity. So Justin Bieber, he puts out a Christian album, I go, legitimate?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, there's a distrust.
Yeah. So tons of options.
Right.
Very little trust. But it's all very interesting, and all you have to do is look at it for 2 seconds, double click it, affirm your attention, and move on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's why I liked this. I actually like this song because I feel like this song is rooted in the middle of all of that.
I do too. No, I
think she's trying to say, like, slow the narrative down a little bit.
Yeah.
And begin to talk about it. Like, that's the invitation, I feel. Like, let's talk about this. Yeah. Like we're doing now. That's why I put it out there. I'm like, I think she wants us to talk about it.
So let's talk about it.
To talk about the despondency and the loss of meaning and purpose.
If she had our emails, she would have said, guys, can you talk about this?
Yeah.
Miley, it's faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
We'll tag you.
Yeah. And actually tell your dad I said hi. Kind of miss that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I guess my thing is, when you look at a 28-year-old or you look at somebody in their mid-30s, understand that even if their narrative is you grew up in a Christian home and you are living out the Christian calling, the culture's despondency and the lack of belonging and the sense of like, what am I doing and why am I doing it, is louder. Yeah. Or is a particular loudness for these people that's different than maybe if you're my age of 52, who was more Gen X, more whatever, more angry at everything, the F you this, and I don't care what you have to say about me, and you've abandoned me. And so I'm more, might be more angry. I don't catch that with her.
Yeah, no, it seems just like a resignation.
Yeah.
Like not in a, I don't mean that as like a giving up, but like, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
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 Not like mad about it. More, and that might be the slight upside to the therapeutic culture.
Well, and that every single one of these, this may also be the difference, is that Miley Cyrus has probably been in therapy for 15 years.
Maybe even more.
Whereas Madonna was not.
Yeah.
I can almost say that with just knowing her story from biographies and stuff. She wasn't, so she's not speaking from any kind of therapeutic education.
Madonna wasn't in therapy. Britney Spears was committed. Miley Cyrus went on her own accord.
And there you go.
That's the difference.
What's the difference? Well, the meaningful song transition, the wrestling with things. Yeah. Yep.
There you go. Well, hey.
That was a fun conversation.
Absolutely.
We'll put a link and in all the different social media things that we do, so you can go listen to Miley Cyrus. And give us an email if you have better, more deep thoughts on this process, or if you want us to talk about stuff. We are back in the saddle, so
back in the
we actually do well with other people telling us what to talk about.
It helps. We've been doing this for a long time, and we kind of we need to give us material. Feel free.
Yeah, give us material, please do. And I do want to say for a moment, just I want to thank you, Brian Merrick. Brian Merrick is someone who I grew up with in high school. So
cool.
He knew Rick Drost, and then he and I started college ministry together, and then he lived with us. Yeah. And he and his wife lived with us for 2 years, helped buy the house that we live in now, and then they went to seminary and moved on. He now lives in I think I can say this. He lives in Ireland, so I can say this. But anyway, he supported us, and he's now one of our subscribers at the Village. So thank you at Faith Over Breakfast. So thank you for making this possible. And we have other supporters. You guys email us, so please, email us.
Yeah,
send us questions. I know that Karen Lefevre said she was going to email us, and she hasn't yet. So email us. What other listeners do? The Gilchrist clan, come on, send us some emails. Tell us what.
Or how about somebody new? Anyone from Mission Church. Anyone
from Mission Church. And if you do, maybe Andy will.
Jacob's giving us some stuff. Brian, Jacob, shout outs to you too. Yeah.
So we have some listeners. We have some people who care about what's being said. Please help us say more things.
Yeah. Give us ideas. So, okay, thanks. So you email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. We love anytime you rate us. That helps share the podcast and get it to populate elsewhere. So thank you. And good to talk to you, Eric.
Yep. Good to talk to you. Thanks. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.